Nau mai, haere mai, piki mai, kake mai, kia ora iwiwi, and welcome to 30 with me, Guyon Espiner. 30 minutes, one guest, no cuts. What we record is what you get. Sir John Kirwan, he was one of the first superstar All Blacks. After his playing days of the 1980s and 1990s, he went on to coach rugby in Italy and Japan. But he's had an immense impact outside the arena of sport. After battling depression himself, he fronted those TV ads encouraging people to be more open about mental health, and his book, All Blacks Don't Cry, tackled New Zealand's macho culture. Now he heads the Mighty Foundation, which teaches mental health awareness in primary schools. But in a country with shocking suicide numbers, a toxic drinking culture still, and new challenges such as social media, how far have we actually come on the mental health journey? Let's start the clock. 30 minutes with John Kirwan. So John Kirwan, thank you very much for coming on 30. I'll call you JK then. Yeah, we'll get started there.
They call me Sir. It's like, when your mother used to tell you off. You go, ooh.
Well, there might be a bit of that. Only jokes. We'll talk about your journey shortly, but I want to start with what you're doing right now and the Mighty Foundation, embedding mental health awareness in primary schools. What is it and how does it work?
Well, it started with failure. So I woke up 5-6 years ago and felt that I'd failed. I've been the face of mental health from a New Zealand point of view for 15 years now. And so if you wake up and, the reason I started it was to lessen suicide, lessen mental health, make more awareness. So I woke up 5 years ago and I read the stats. So by the end of this evening, a New Zealand male will be dead by suicide. By tomorrow evening, 2 males and 1 female.
Still.
So I failed. Right? And failure, don't get me wrong, I'm not sitting a failure. I'm saying I realised that what I was doing was not working. So like I said, I don't get scared of that. So I thought, how do we change this? And, a lot of your viewers might not remember this movie, but my reference to mental health and the reason I didn't reach out and get help was One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Jack Nicholson
and Chief, the big American Indian guy, right?
Yep.
So I thought if I spoke to my doctor, I'm going to get locked up with him. But that was a real issue for me, right? So I had no knowledge of it. Morph that 15 years doing the advertising, doing all the awareness campaigns, the hope campaigns, depression.org.nz. I fly around the country and we're still not teaching our tamariki anything about mental health, right? So the kids are still getting shocked when they're 11, when they're changing schools, 13, high suicide rates. So what I did is I raised $250,000. The Joyce Fisher Foundation Trust gave me $250,000, and I went round the world looking for programs. And then I looked internally, and what we came up with was that there's no curriculum for our kids around mental health. So they do English, maths and science, but they don't do mental health. And that we have this amazing resource, but it's all in these books. And so raised some more money, and we created a curriculum around mental health that goes into our primary schools that give our kids the awareness and the tools that they need for when they are getting a bit older.
And when you say you created the curriculum, did you do that with experts?
Yeah, totally. So when I say I did it, I can't even spell, mate. So I didn't do it. Left school when I was 15. So what we did is with the extra $250,000, we went to the University of Auckland, and there were professors there that specialise in this. One Katie Fitzpatrick, for example, has written like the guidelines for mental health. And so what we said to them is, can you turn this into a curriculum-based program for primary schools? And they said, yes, we can. So they went away and built this curriculum. It's on a mana model, so it comes from a Māori model. And so built it on the mana model with all the information, and we turned it into a curriculum. And what we do is we pay teachers, so we have our own teachers that then go into schools and upskill the whole school. So they upskill all the teachers, and then the teachers teach the tamariki about mental health and what they need to.
And do you need to get in that early? I mean, as I understand it, you were initially thinking, oh, do I need to be in high schools?
Totally.
And then you brought it back, right?
Well, the biggest surprise for me, right, if you go our highest suicide rates from 15 to 23, then you go, let's get into secondary schools. And I was convinced. And the child psychiatrists and psychologists said to me, it's too late. Our kids now, tamariki now need it by 9, 10 or 11. You know, our youngest suicide last year was 9. You know, I suffered from a clinical depression, but I wasn't thinking about that shit when I was 9. You know what I'm saying? So the kids need this education from 5 years of age. And the best way I explain it, because I can only explain it with a story, right? When I went to school and I cried my first day at school, what did we get told? Harden up, don't cry, right? So what did that do to me? Oh, I can't cry. I still can't cry.
You bottle things up.
You know, so I've got an emotion that is a real human emotion that you need that then gets stifled, right? Was I suffering from separation anxiety from my mum? You know, what would have been called back then? Homesickness. So there's all these things that you need to learn at 5. You know, it's okay to cry. We'll look after you. I'm the teacher. Here's all your friends. They don't care you're crying because it's not normal. So there's a whole lot of different things that you can do that will prepare kids for a way better mental health journey.
And what sort of impact do you think that you are having? I mean, it is early days, but...
Yeah, so there's 3 things that are fundamental for me. Needs to be curriculum based, and that got hammered into me in the work that we did. The second thing is you need to study it and continue to break it. Make sense? And it also needs to be co-designed. So I'm from Māngere, right? What might be good in a Māngere school is not going to be good in a Remuera school. What's going to be good in a South Auckland school might not be good in a Southland school. So it needs to be co-designed, right? The other thing that's fundamental for me is we continue to do the research on making sure it works. So we just had Impact Lab, which is a social business that goes into your charity or goes into your business. And if you spend $1, what are you saving society? So every $1 spent with us, you're saving $5.80 from a social point of view. So I've kept changing, kept the data going, and make sure that we continue to co-design.
And is it all private money? Do you get any government money from this?
No, I don't.
Do you want it?
Yes, yeah, of course. Yeah.
You've put your hand up for government money?
No, I haven't, not yet. So there's a few things, you know, this is a really difficult industry, right? Because I'm always shaking the can. Like right now, I need to raise $2 million for next year, right? So I've got to go out and ask people for that. So one of the things, and I haven't asked the government, so they know we exist because the Ministry of Education know us, they agree with us, they like what we're doing. But I haven't gone to them and said, I want money, because I had to prove it out. You know, we've just had the Impact Lab come back, so we know that this is working and we know that it's a thing that we can drive forward. But also, how do I make it sustainable, right? So how do we make this particular program sustainable? And so what I'm trying to do is work out different ways. At the moment, I'm talking to the financial sector. You know, can we create a fund, because New Zealanders are incredibly generous. You know, our wealthy are incredibly generous. You'll be incredibly surprised about how much money they put in. But even us poorer people, you know, a lot of people that have got $1 will give you 20 or 30 cents of that just to help out. So we're incredibly generous. But for me, how do you make it sustainable over the long term so we don't have to keep asking for money?
This pendulum swung back a lot, from the times where we didn't talk about it and it was a source of shame to now. It is more common, even on social media, on Instagram, to talk about your problems and to talk about mental health awareness. Is there a danger at all of overexposing this? Can the pendulum swing back too far?
Yeah, totally. Like I think, you know, I'm depressed as a saying shouldn't be something you should be saying, you know, if you're down for a couple of days. So yeah, I think there is a swing. But like anything in this world, you've got to swing this way to come back to the middle. So what I think is fundamental is now the prevention space. So I'm in the prevention space. We've got to stop pushing people off the cliff. You know, suicide is the extreme of what I'm talking about. And with Mighty and Groove, my business, what I want to present is preventative stuff. I don't want you getting unwell. So it's a bit like, I'd say to people the other day, and it's a bit of a joke, right? So please don't take me too serious. If you were born in the 80s, life was shit hot because you used to smoke and drink piss and no one gave a shit. You could eat 4 pies and no one gave a shit, right? Because we just didn't know. Ignorance was bliss. But by the end of the 80s, people were saying to you and I, maybe you shouldn't smoke. Or maybe you shouldn't drink because you're drinking for the wrong reasons, and maybe you shouldn't eat 4 pies. Maybe you should only eat 1 a week, right? But we've had all that education, right? So now you have those decisions that you can make. But with mental health, there's this awareness, but do you know how to look after your mental health every day? Do you know how to prevent it?
I don't.
No, and a lot of people don't. But because I suffered, I now have a daily mental health plan that keeps me well, and it's based in clinical and behavioural science.
And you still do that?
Yeah, I do it every single day.
What might a 10, 11, 12-year-old John Kirwan have got out of your program?
I'd be able to identify my emotions, right? So when I grew up, there was happy, sad and angry, right? And there's way more emotions than that. I'd be able to identify that emotion and then have the tools to deal with that emotion so that it doesn't become an issue. Like, for example, I talk about my dumb shark, right? So I felt dumb all my life, never passed an exam in my life. So for a long, long time, until I suffered my depression, I felt dumb. So I'd walk into a room with you and feel incredibly inferior and dumb. So I'd hide, or I'd give you a fake JK, right? Normally I'd dress, like dressing up for me when I was a young man was a disguise. And then I fell in love with fashion. But it was a disguise because you talk to me, if you're my peer, you say, well, you got gold shoes on, JK, you dick, what's that about? But you wouldn't be looking at me or talking about me. So I was hiding, right? So what we are trying to achieve is that our tamariki understand their emotions, can deal with their emotions, and then go on a pathway of dealing with some of the stuff. I'm a little bit on the dyslexic scale. I'm really creative. I can simplify complicated problems. But when I was growing up at school, I didn't pass an exam, so I'm dumb.
Let's dive back a bit into your childhood. You did leave school early, didn't you? Just before your 16th birthday, I think, and went to your dad's butcher shop in Māngere as a butcher's apprentice.
Yep.
You always, though, you say in your book, All Blacks Don't Cry, you always had a destiny. You said, I always knew that I had a destiny in something. Did you always want to be an All Black?
No, but I always felt that there was something bigger for me.
Where do you reckon that came from?
I have no idea, and I think it was a really, really important part of this contrast that I had in my head, this doubt, imposter syndrome, I call them sharks, imposter shark, dumb shark, guilt shark, I want to be like shark, versus this flamboyant blonde-headed winger that you see on the rugby field trying to be world's best. So there was this contrast which didn't make sense, The other thing is I had a brilliant upbringing. I had beautiful parents, beautiful 3 siblings, older sisters, And so I looked at my upbringing and why the hell would I be depressed? But that made me worse, Because I'm thinking, I've even got a free car, why are you depressed? So I had these sort of contrasts in my head that didn't make sense a lot of the time. So I'd run out on the football field and, the country would see this Aucklander, and
they would,
I'd be going into the change room and saying, when am I going to get dropped? When are they going to find out I'm a fake? So...
You were an All Black at what, 19?
Yeah, 19.
Incredibly
19, 3 months and 3 weeks. So I was the 3rd youngest until Jonah came along.
And this was in an era where the All Blacks were phenomenal. I mean, you won the World Cup in 87. You had this sort of unbroken, I think, 23-test run from 87 to 90. You played a massive part in that. You must have felt like gods in those days.
Well, I never did. I always felt an imposter from... So the interesting thing for me was I was an anxiety-based depressant. So I didn't know what anxiety was. I didn't know what anxiety attacks were. They'd come and then they'd leave me and I'd go back to relative normal, right? But what happens when you have an anxiety attack, when it goes away and you go back to relative normal, it leaves a little scar in your head and that scar is called fear. So as I started to get more famous and started to get more successful, the anxiety attacks came more. And I didn't do anything about them because I didn't know what they were, because I think I'm going to tell the doc and get locked up because I think I'm going insane. And that's a real fear. So, but when I went back to relatively normal, how could I express myself? I expressed myself on the rugby field. Matched that up with being around at the right time. So John Hart selected me. I was the first ever big winger. The second thing it is, I got a private trainer, personal trainer, when they didn't exist, because I wanted to get out of the butcher shop because I had this grand dream. So you see how the two contrasting? But then inside me, I had all these self-doubt, and so it was bound to come to a head, but I didn't know that at the time because I didn't address my anxiety attacks.
And you write in that book that your biggest fear wasn't sort of self-harming and the sort of suicidal stuff. It was this fear that you would hurt someone else. I think you wrote that your biggest fear was that you were going to murder someone else.
Yeah.
Is that a guilt thing, do you think?
No, I think it's an unwell mind. And my psychiatrist, back when I eventually went to a psychiatrist, so, I had suicidal ruminations, and so I thought about suicide a lot. I didn't plan my own suicide, and for that I feel eternally grateful. I also had, so I'd see a news article, right, of someone who had done something bad, and I think, that's why I'm unwell, that's insanity, and that's where I'm going, right? Because I had no knowledge of what my illness was, so I was referring to stuff that wasn't true. So what I say is, an unwell mind takes those thoughts and run with them. A sane mind just goes, don't be stupid, and so when my mind was unwell, I'd have these thoughts that would drive me to bed shaking, walk past the knife thinking, I'm going to stab myself or stab someone else, and I'm going to be on the news because that's the illness this is the insanity I'm heading towards, back to Jack Nicholson and Chief the Big Indian guy, right?
Yeah.
And so it was an incredibly tough time because I'm living this double life, but I'm also performing at the highest level.
And how hard was it, and would it have been, to be open about that in those days? I mean, in All Black culture and in New Zealand male culture, especially at the time.
So I think that we talk about culture, but back then, and I still believe now, our high performance sport is a reflection of our culture. It cracks me up when we give an athlete shit because he got pissed. Like, that's our culture. Let's talk about our culture, right? Let's not talk about our elite that live our culture, right? And so I think what the All Blacks were back then was a reflection of our culture. I went into the side, there was 4 or 5 Aucklanders, 15 farmers, right? We were rugby, racing and beer.
Yeah.
We were very introverted, you wouldn't show your emotions.
Yeah.
We weren't allowed to celebrate when you scored a try, because if you did, you were, had a big head, And so I think that when I decided to talk about it, it was because I remember ringing my beautiful mum. Mum was an incredibly wise woman. And I said, Mum, they've asked me to do this. A friend of mine, Kevin Denham, it's really his fault, and another guy called Glenn McGann, who I played rugby with. He was a great rugby player, Glenn. But he came to me one day and said, JK, I want you to do these depression ads. And I said, what are you talking about? Because I didn't know anyone knew I was unwell. I didn't even know how he knew it. Right. And then he passed that on to Kevin Denham, who's one of our greatest film ad makers, and he's a great mate of mine, and he sat outside my house for 24 hours until I said yes. But I remember ringing Mum and saying, this is going to ruin my career. I'm going not do any more ads, this is going to ruin it. And my mum said to me, if you can help one person, is it worth it? And I said, yeah, because I don't want anyone to go through what I went through. I mean, I'm a better person out the other end, mate. I'm a better person, but it was a rocky road. So,
and tell me about the reaction to that. I mean, what did people? You're obviously a very famous face in New Zealand. People are very excited to see you come into reception today here at Māori TV. What was the reaction like for you? Did people come up to you?
Yeah. So my thoughts were that I am, I'm going to be ostracised. I'm going to have stigma around me. But I'd say that 95% of people, I get hugs in the supermarket.
Still?
Yeah, and not about rugby. I still get banter. We're talking downstairs, about the Blues and about, Artie going to Moana Pacifica. And so I still have that beautiful rugby element to my side, but most of my discussions, people will come up and share their mental health with me, which is beautiful, And so it's been an incredible journey for me personally.
How much have we changed, especially men in New Zealand, in terms of being able to talk to each other about how we feel? I mean, you talk in your book, and you spend a lot of time in Italy, right? Emotionally, very, might as well be a different species.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, most men, I don't know about you and your groups and your mates, but we still struggle, don't we, to be open and in touch and.
Men are shit, man. We're shit clinically. Have you been and had your prostate done and had the thing down your mouth and had your heart shit done?
Oh, a couple of years back.
Yeah, a couple of years back,
Yeah.
I do it every 5 years, right? But some of my mates haven't, and I'm 60 this year.
But it's funny because when you said that to me, I was like, "Oh, am I going to say
shit.
this?
Yeah.
Because we
Yeah.
don't cut this,
Yeah.
so this is live.
Exactly.
We might as well be." And I was like, "Oh, am I going to say this?
Shit,
I don't want to talk about this."
Yeah. And I'd make a joke with it with my mates. I say, "Have you had the cold steel up you and the cold steel down you?" I'll piss off, JK, right? So we are still struggling. Now, I think, and this is my major issue, the awareness is there and we can talk about it, but what do we do about it? So the prevention space is really, really important for me.
But do men, are we, in your experience, able to say, "Mate, I've been feeling pretty down recently. I'm pretty lonely," or those sorts of emotions?
Not initially.
Do you think we've changed like that?
Yeah, I think we're way better.
We're better, yeah.
And I have a few groups of men. So this is going to sound really weird, but the pub got taken away from us. So, if you're a farmer, you used to go to the pub and talk about the tractor being broken down, all that sort of stuff. So a lot of these social things that have died with social media and all that sort of stuff have made it a lot harder for us to connect. Like rugby clubs, for example. If you're in Auckland, they're really struggling. In the provinces, they're way better. So where do you go to catch up with your mates?
Yeah, I go play pool.
There you go.
Because in my experience, men need something to do while we
Totally.
talk. So I go play pool with my mates.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
And then I might have a chat, and I might tell them a little bit about how I'm feeling.
Yeah, and you've got to humanise it. You can't. It's got to be put into English that we all understand, and it's got to be in a non-threatening environment, right? But the issue that I'm trying to deal with is, okay, so what do you do about it now? Like if I talk about the cold steel up and the cold steel down here, all the boys go, "I'm not going to the doctor, man." You know what I mean? So if we're talking about your mental health, when you walk away from that discussion where you feel better because you've shared it with your mates, but what the hell are you going to do? And that's really important for me, that we start teaching our tamariki to start with, and then the workplace is, okay, here's 5 things you can do in your day that are preventative mental health measures. So we're not going to push you off the cliff. So you're not going to be burnt out. There is no work-life balance anymore, right?
Not really, and technology has obliterated the boundaries between that to some degree, right?
Which is a neat thing and a bad thing. I was with this young guy the other day, and he got a text, and he went, "Oh shit!" And I said, "Oh, what's up, bro?" And he said, "Oh, my son just came second in the school races." I said, "Oh, congratulations, man." He said, "Oh shit, I feel so stink as a dad, I wasn't there." And I went, "My dad never came to my school, and he was a great dad. He was working." But you get the text, don't you?
Yeah.
And it makes you feel like shit, regardless, right?
And immediately if you hadn't been invited to the birthday, whereas it used to be you had to wait till Monday
Yeah,
morning.
who cares? And you did something else anyway, it didn't matter, right?
Yeah.
You didn't sit there getting photos sent to you. So there's a lot of these things, and look, I talk about one of the most important things in my day is connection, okay? So the 6 pillars of preventative mental health are chill. How do you switch your brain off from the world, right? My 3 are I read, I cook, and I play the guitar badly. Like, it sounds like I'm killing a cat in the lounge. But it takes me away. What are you doing to grow your mind, right? I'm learning how to read music. How do you connect, right? And I connect in 3 ways. I connect with my phone, because I've got kids overseas, my wife's overseas, so I love technology, right? So I connect through technology. But I also need to connect with people. I love doing stuff like this, right? But I also need to connect with nature. So you need to get those 3 in line, right? What do you celebrate today? What are you going to celebrate? How are you going to enjoy something today? And I do that on a daily basis. So this morning, for example, I've already looked after my mental health to start with. And
What have you done?
So shower is really important for me, but I feel the water. So I have a shower where I actually am in the moment.
So that's kind of like what they call in flashwaves mindfulness, I suppose.
Totally.
I always think, what do they mean mindfulness? But kind
Totally.
of having the coffee, having the shower, feeling the pleasure of the moment, right?
Totally. And I learned that through my mum. I went and saw my mum and said, "Mum, I'm dead." And she said, "Well, the good thing about your dead son is you're still here," because I was struggling. And she said a couple of things to me. "Can you change yesterday?" I said, "No, Mum, I can't." She said, "Do you worry about yesterday?" And I said, "Yeah, too much." She said, "Well, you can't change it, so stop worrying. Can you tell me what's happening tomorrow?" And I said, "No, Mum, I can't." She said, "Do you worry about tomorrow?" I said, "Yes." Waste of time. She said, "What do you got?" And I said, "Today." She said, "Well, just be great today," right? But then she said to me, "And how do you smell the roses?" And that's an old mum and dad saying, Yeah. And I drove home that day and I thought, I'm going to have a shower as my, right? So the next morning I got up and I had the shower and I felt the water, right? And I felt it wash over me and I felt incredible when I get out. How do you think my day went?
Pretty good.
No, I went like shit. But
Why's that?
I had the shower to look forward to because I was unwell. But I had the shower to look forward to, right? So I started looking forward to the shower even though my day was shit because I was still depressed.
So taking those small little wins.
Yeah. And then I habit stacked that with a cup of coffee. But my phone's not invited to my coffee date. Because when you invite your phone to your coffee date, you do not taste your coffee, right? So already this morning, I've had a shower and I enjoyed that 3 minutes, right? I had a cup of coffee and read the newspaper. But I didn't look at social media, I didn't look at anything like that, right? Tonight, before I go to sleep, I'll read because I've got an active mind. And when I read, I call it Bob the monkey, he goes into his cage and has a banana and goes to sleep. If I don't, he keeps me awake till 2. So I've got all these little things in my day. I'll play the guitar for 20 minutes. I'll read a bit of music. So in my day, I am doing these 6 pillars and everyone's different, right? The word well-being is not a word I like anymore because it's so individualized. You might like going and playing pool. I hate pool. So you take me, I'm going to hate it, right? But I will play the guitar or read a book. So everyone's different. I read an article the other day about knitting. Knitting's really good for your mental health, right? So do knitting for 10 minutes.
So there are small, practical, little things that you can do, I suppose, but like the gym, right? You're physically looking after yourself. We need to sort of translate that thinking into looking after our
Your
heads.
mind. Time, yeah. And look, a lot of and one of the key pillars is move, right? So what are you doing in your move pillar? Because if you move, it does help your mental health. So a lot of people go, I need to go to the gym. And that's awesome because I need to go to the gym. But they also need to stack it with some other stuff. Because what if you can't go to the gym, right? So it's important to have a couple of things like your connect piece. In your connect piece, if you like connecting through tech, but that's all you're connecting, that's not healthy, right? How are you connecting with people? How are you connecting with nature if that's your gig, right? So it's good to have, a mate of mine came around the other day and we were talking about mental health and I said, how do you keep yourself well, mate? He says, oh man, I love golf, I said, awesome, when was the last time you played? He said 6 weeks ago. Well, that's not going to be too good for you then, is it? If you're looking after yourself mentally every 6 weeks. So I know golf, so I love surfing. I've been surfing for 6 weeks. So if that was my mental health prevention, I haven't looked after it for 6 weeks. Yeah. But I've got other things. Yeah. And I think those 6 pillars are fundamental. Yeah.
Just a couple of minutes left. You're happy?
I talk too much,
no,
sorry.
It's great. It's great. It's gone fast. You're happy now?
Yeah. I tell people that I went from surviving to thriving. You know, does life throw curveballs at me? Yeah. You know, is life tough at times? Sure. But I am thriving. And it's because I put my mental health first. And people say, JK, why do you put your mental health first? I'm a better husband, better father, better workmate, and a better me. So if I don't put my mental health first, I'm not a good husband, I'm not a good dad, right? So I put my mental health first and everything else flows from it.
It's interesting because talking to you today, you're breaking it down into simple concepts, because when people talk about their mental health, it just seems so big. It just seems like a mountain. Like, where am I going to tackle this thing from?
It's really interesting. So I've got some old rugby mates from that generation that say, oh, you're still bloody hugging trees, JK. You know.
Do they?
Well, they don't get mental health, right? But when I talk to them about their week, like, for example, a mate of mine rings out, you know, having a bit of a laugh about it. He's really good, don't get me wrong, but, you know, hugging trees, JK, because he hasn't ever suffered. So I ask him about his week. Oh, every morning, mate, I get up and have a cup of tea and I read the newspaper. I said, oh, yeah, awesome. Good stuff, mate. And he says, every Wednesday night, we meet at the rugby club, right? And we get together as a bunch of boys, we have a couple of beers and have a bit of a yarn. I said, awesome, mate. That's mental health. You know?
Yeah. It's just that we don't call it that. Yeah.
It's just, but that, you know, that is mental health.
Awesome to talk to you. Thank you very much for coming in. Really appreciate your time.
You're welcome.
Sir John Kirwan.
Not just
It's not that I get that one in before we finish. That was 30 minutes with John Kirwan. This is 30 with me, Guyon Espiner, and we'll catch you next time.